The morning was calm when she left home. The air smelled of sea salt and the wind brushed lightly across her face as she stood on the dock, clutching her small travel bag. She had always loved the ocean, but that day it felt different, almost alive, as if it was whispering something she couldn't understand. She was going to visit her aunt on a small island a few hours away by ferry. It was supposed to be a simple trip, just a few days of rest before returning to her city life. The ferry was half full, with people chatting softly, some sipping tea, some watching the horizon. She found a quiet corner near the railing, where the wind played with her hair and the sun painted a golden path across the water. She closed her eyes, feeling peaceful. The ocean stretched endlessly, gentle and calm, and she felt grateful for the moment. An old woman sitting nearby smiled at her. "The sea is kind today," the woman said softly. She smiled back, not knowing how true or false those words would turn out to be. For the first hour, everything went smoothly. The ferry moved steadily, cutting through the calm waves. Children laughed, seagulls followed them, and the crew hummed old songs. But slowly the air began to change. The sky, once clear, turned heavy with gray clouds. The sound of the engine grew louder, and the waves started to slap against the sides with force. She looked up at the sky, worried. A few passengers murmured, watching the horizon darken. The wind grew stronger, and soon rain began to fall, soft at first, then hard enough to sting. The crew rushed to secure things as thunder rumbled across the sea. People started panicking, clinging to each other, while the ferry rocked more violently with each wave. She tried to stay calm, gripping the railing, her heart pounding fast. The ocean roared as if it had lost its patience. A loud crash came from below. The boat tilted sharply to one side, sending people sliding across the deck. Screams filled the air. She tried to hold on, but the water splashed over her, cold and merciless. The sky flashed white with lightning, and in that split second she saw the terror on everyone's faces, people she didn't know but whose fear matched hers. The next moment, a giant wave rose like a dark wall. Before she could even take a breath, it hit the ferry hard. The world spun into chaos. She was thrown off her feet, her bag flying away, and suddenly, there was no solid ground beneath her, only the freezing sea swallowing her whole. The water pulled her down, spinning her like a leaf in a storm. She tried to scream, but her mouth filled with salt. Her lungs burned as she kicked wildly, searching for the surface. Above her, flashes of light broke through the dark water. She reached out, desperate for air, for something to hold, but the waves dragged her deeper. Her mind screamed, "This can't be how it ends." She thought of her mother, her home, her life waiting beyond the sea. Just when her body was giving up, something, she didn't know what, pushed her upward, a force stronger than the current. She broke through the surface, gasping, coughing, choking for air. The storm raged around her, and the ferry was nowhere in sight. All she could see were monstrous waves, crashing and curling like angry beasts. The rain blinded her, but she forced herself to move, one breath at a time, one stroke at a time. The waves carried her like a toy, sometimes pulling her under, sometimes lifting her toward the sky. Time stopped making sense. She didn't know how long she fought, but her strength faded. Her body went numb, her thoughts blurred, and finally everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying on something soft. The first thing she noticed was the warmth of sunlight on her skin. The sound of the waves was still there, but gentler now, calm and distant. She turned her head slightly and realized she was on a beach, a long, quiet stretch of sand surrounded by thick green trees. The sky was bright, the air still. She tried to sit up but fell back down, weak and dizzy. Her clothes were torn, her hands scraped, and her throat burned from the salt. The sea glittered in front of her, innocent, as if the storm had never happened. She blinked several times, wondering if she was dreaming, but the pain in her body told her it was real. She dragged herself to her knees, scanning the horizon. No ferry, no people, no sign of rescue, only the sound of birds calling from the trees. Her heart sank. She was alive, but completely alone. She walked along the shore slowly, leaving footprints on the wet sand. Pieces of driftwood and seaweed lay scattered everywhere. The tide had brought her here, but where exactly was here? She had never seen an island like this. It looked untouched, wild, beautiful, but lonely. The sun climbed higher, and she realized she needed water, food, shade, something to keep her alive. She followed a narrow path leading into the trees. The air grew cooler under the thick leaves, and she heard the sound of running water, A small stream appeared, clear and fresh. She knelt down and drank, feeling life return to her body. As she sat beside the stream, she noticed footprints in the mud, old ones, maybe human. Her heart raced. Someone lived here. Hope sparked inside her. She followed the trail deeper into the woods, calling out softly, but no one answered. The trees swayed gently, and somewhere in the distance she heard the sound of wood cracking. Then she saw smoke rising beyond the trees. She hurried toward it, her legs trembling from exhaustion. At the edge of a small clearing stood a tiny wooden hut, half hidden by vines and flowers. Outside, an old fishing net hung from a tree, and near the door a fire burned with a small pot over it. She froze, unsure whether to move closer. After a moment, the door creaked open and an old man stepped out. His face was tanned and lined, his hair white like seafoam. He looked at her for a long moment, silent and still, as if trying to decide if she was real. "You came from the sea," he said finally, his voice low but steady. She nodded, unable to find her words. He walked closer, studying her with eyes that held years of stories. "You're lucky. The sea doesn't let many go." Her knees almost gave way. He caught her arm gently and helped her sit by the fire. She couldn't stop shaking. He gave her a cup of warm broth. The taste was simple but comforting. She felt tears fill her eyes. "Where am I?" she whispered. He looked toward the water. "A place the world forgot," he said. "An island that keeps who it chooses." She stared at him, confused, too tired to ask more. All she knew was that she was alive, sitting on an unknown island beside a stranger who spoke like the sea itself. As the day faded into evening, the waves glowed golden in the last light. Somewhere beyond that horizon, people were searching for her, believing she was gone. But here in this quiet, lost place, she was breathing safe, at least for now. She watched the ocean, the same one that tried to take her, and whispered softly, "Why me?" But the sea didn't answer. It only shimmered under the fading sun, calm and endless, as if it already knew what came next. Variant, standard, tidal. She vanished into the waves. Part 2. Torso 2. When she woke up the next morning, the sound of the waves was the first thing she heard. The air was warm and smelled of salt and wood smoke. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then everything rushed back. The storm, the ferry, the water pulling her down, and waking up on this strange island with an old man she didn't know. He was sitting near the fire, stirring something in a pot. When he saw her open her eyes, he gave a small nod, the kind that meant he had expected her to wake exactly then. "You slept well," he said simply. She sat up slowly, her body still aching, her mind full of questions. He handed her a small wooden bowl filled with soup. It was thin but warm, made with roots and small bits of fish. She ate in silence, not realizing how hungry she had been until the bowl was empty. When she looked up, he was watching her quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded again like he didn't need thanks. For a long time, neither spoke. The ocean murmured outside, and a soft wind played through the trees. Finally, she asked, "What is this place?" The old man poked at the fire with a stick. "A place most have forgotten," he said. "An island that's not on any map." She frowned, trying to understand. "There must be a way to leave," she said. "Someone must come here sometimes." He looked at her then, his eyes sharp but kind. "Sometimes boats pass," he said. "But the sea around this place is not friendly. It lets you come only if it wants, and it lets you leave the same way." She didn't know what to say. She looked toward the beach where the waves moved gently, innocent again. It was hard to believe that same sea had almost killed her. Later that day, she walked along the shore, trying to see if there were any signs of other people, footprints, boats, anything. But there was nothing. Only shells, driftwood, and her own prints in the sand. The island seemed peaceful, but there was something strange about its silence. It wasn't empty. It felt like it was listening. She returned to the hut before sunset. The old man was mending a fishing net. She sat nearby, watching him work. His hands were rough, his fingers steady. He looked like someone who had done the same thing every day for years. "You live here alone?" she asked softly. He nodded. "A long time now. Why?" He smiled faintly, not looking up. "Because the island keeps me." She wanted to ask what he meant, but something in his voice told her not to push. Instead, she asked, "What's your name?" He chuckled quietly. "Names don't matter much here. You can call me what you like." That night, she lay awake inside the small hut, listening to the sounds of the island, the waves outside, the crackle of the dying fire. the insects singing in the dark. She felt safe for the first time since the storm, yet a strange feeling kept her awake. It was as if the island itself was alive, watching her, protecting her in its quiet way. Days passed slowly after that. Each morning, she helped gather fruit from the forest and fetch water from the stream. The old man showed her how to clean fish and cook over an open fire. They didn't talk much, but she began to feel comfort in his silence. There was something peaceful about the rhythm of life there. Sometimes she wandered deeper into the trees. The island was full of life, bright birds, tall palms, tiny flowers that glowed in the sunlight. But she also found things that didn't belong. Pieces of broken pottery, the remains of old huts covered in vines, and strange symbols carved into stones. It looked like people had once lived there long ago, maybe a small village that time had swallowed. She asked the old man about it one evening. He looked at her for a long time before answering. "There were people here once," he said. "A small group. Fishermen, families. The sea gave them food, but one day it took everything back. Since then, no one stays for long. Except me," she felt a chill. "And me," she said quietly. He smiled, a sad kind of smile. "Yes, the island chose to keep you." The days turned into weeks. She began to grow stronger, her skin darkened by the sun, her body no longer weak. She learned to fish, to climb for fruit, to read the weather by the color of the sky. She even started to feel a kind of peace, as if the island itself was healing her from the fear that had followed her since the storm. But sometimes at night she still dreamed of the sea. In her dreams, the waves whispered her name, calling her back. She would wake up sweating, listening to the ocean's endless voice just outside. One morning she went walking farther than before, following a narrow path along the cliffs. From up there she could see the whole island. Its green heart, its white beaches, and the deep blue water surrounding it like a wall. It was beautiful, but also lonely. There was no sign of any boat, no smoke on the horizon, nothing that said the outside world was near. She sat down on a rock and watched the sea for a long time. The wind was soft, the sun warm. For a moment she almost forgot she was trapped. She thought of her family and how they must believe she was gone forever. She wondered if they were still searching or if they had given up. When she returned, the old man was waiting. "You went far today," he said. She nodded. "I wanted to see if there was a way out." "There's always a way out," he said. "But it's not always the way you think," she frowned. "You speak like the sea does," he laughed quietly. "I've been listening to it longer than you." That evening, as they sat by the fire, he told her something he hadn't before. "This island," he said, "it's not just land. It has a spirit, an old one. It doesn't harm anyone, but it decides who stays. Some come here by accident, some by choice. Some leave, some don't." She looked into his eyes, searching for a sign he was joking, but he was serious. "You think the island saved me?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "It does that sometimes. When the sea takes too much, the island gives something back." She stared into the flames, trying to make sense of his words. Maybe it was just a story, a way for him to explain what couldn't be explained. But a part of her believed him. The island did feel alive. She could sense it in the stillness, in the way the wind carried the scent of the ocean, in how the waves always seemed to calm when she stood near them. That night the sky was clear, filled with stars. She stepped outside, looking up. The stars seemed closer here, almost within reach. She thought about how far away the rest of the world felt. Her home, her friends, everything she had left behind. A soft sound made her turn. The old man was sitting near the fire again, humming a tune that sounded like an old lullaby. She sat beside him. "Do you ever wish to leave?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "I used to. But after a while I realized the island had given me something the world couldn't. Peace." She looked toward the dark line of the sea, glittering under the moonlight. "I don't know if I can live like this forever," she said honestly. He nodded. "Then you won't. The island knows when it's time to let go." She didn't understand what he meant, but she didn't ask. Instead, she watched the waves roll in, soft and glowing. For the first time, she didn't feel fear when she looked at them. She felt gratitude. The island had saved her life. She didn't know why or how, but deep down she felt she was here for a reason. And though she didn't know it yet, her time on the island was only beginning to reveal what that reason was. Variant. Standard. Title. She Vanished into the Waves. Part 3. Shortkar. Briwi 3. The days on the island began to blend together. The sound of the waves became her morning song, and the soft hum of the trees was the rhythm of her nights. Life followed a gentle routine now. She would wake up at sunrise, fetch water from the stream, gather fruits, and help the old man with whatever small tasks he had. It was a simple life, but peaceful. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this place than met the eye. The island wasn't just a piece of land, it felt alive. Sometimes she could sense when the weather was about to change, long before the clouds appeared. Other times she would feel a strange comfort when she sat by the shore, as if the waves themselves were wrapping around her in protection. One afternoon, while walking near the northern side of the island, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Hidden behind a wall of vines was an old stone path. The stones were smooth and gray, partly covered by moss. Curiosity led her forward. The path wound through the trees, leading to a small clearing where the remains of an old building stood. It wasn't much, just a few fallen walls and a broken archway, but there was something hauntingly beautiful about it. In the center stood a large flat stone with markings carved deeply into it. She brushed off the dirt and tried to read them, but they weren't in any language she knew. The symbols looked ancient, shaped like waves and circles, repeated over and over. She felt a chill run through her, though the air was warm. That night she asked the old man about it. He listened quietly as she described the place, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he sighed and stared into the fire. "That's an old place," he said. "Older than anyone remembers. People say it was built by those who lived here before, long before I came." "What do the markings mean?" she asked. He shook his head. "No one knows for sure. Some say they're prayers to the sea. Others say they're warnings." "Warnings of what?" He looked up at her, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "That the sea gives, but it also takes. Everything has a balance." She didn't press him further, but his words stayed in her mind. The island was peaceful, yes, but it had a strange kind of energy. She began to notice small things she hadn't before. Whenever she felt sad, the sky would turn cloudy. When she laughed, even the waves seemed to sparkle brighter. She started to wonder if the island could feel her emotions somehow. One morning, a sudden storm rolled in. The sky darkened quickly, and strong winds whipped through the trees. The old man told her to stay inside, but something pulled her toward the shore. She stood there watching as the waves rose and crashed against the rocks, wild and furious, and yet deep inside she didn't feel afraid. Instead, she felt a strange connection, as if the sea was speaking to her again, the same way it had the day it took her from the ferry. She closed her eyes, letting the rain hit her face. For a moment she felt the world fall silent. Then, through the roar of the storm, she heard it, a faint, soft sound, almost like a whisper. She couldn't understand the words, but it felt like a voice calling her name. When she opened her eyes, the sea had calmed. Just like that, the storm began to fade, the clouds breaking apart. She turned slowly, and there, standing a few feet behind her, was the old man. He looked at her strangely, almost with fear. "You shouldn't be out here," he said, his voice low. "I heard something," she said softly, like a voice. He didn't answer for a while. Then he said, "The island speaks to those it trusts. You should listen carefully but never answer back." His words confused her, but she didn't argue. Still, from that day on, she couldn't stop thinking about it. The voice in the waves, the carvings on the stones, the strange peace she felt here. It all seemed connected. As the weeks passed, she and the old man grew closer. He began to share small pieces of his past. How he had once been a fisherman who got caught in a storm decades ago and washed up here just like her. He said he had tried to leave many times, but the sea always brought him back. Eventually, he stopped fighting it and made the island his home. "Maybe it's meant to protect people like us," she said one night, watching the fire flicker. "Or maybe it keeps us because we have nowhere else to go," he said quietly. She didn't know which answer felt truer. One day, while exploring the ruins again, she found something new. Behind one of the fallen stones, hidden in the dirt, was a small wooden carving. It was shaped like a shell, smooth and polished, as if someone had held it often. She turned it over in her hand and saw a tiny pattern carved into the back, the same wave symbol as on the big stone. She took it back to the hut and showed it to the old man. His eyes widened slightly when he saw it. "That," he said slowly, "belonged to them. The ones who came before. Who were they?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said some called them the sea's children. People who believed the ocean was alive. They thought the sea chose who to save and who to take. She looked down at the carving, feeling its smooth surface. "Do you think that's true?" He smiled faintly. After all we've seen, do you still think it's just water and waves? That night she couldn't sleep. She sat outside, holding the carving in her hands. The moonlight shimmered across the ocean, and for the first time, she felt calm, not because she understood the island, but because she accepted that she didn't have to. As the days went by, her bond with the island grew stronger. She could predict when it would rain, when the sea would rise, and when fish would swim near the shore. Even the birds seemed to follow her around. The old man watched quietly, sometimes smiling, sometimes frowning, as if he knew something she didn't. One evening, while walking near the stream, she noticed the water glowing faintly under the moonlight. It shimmered like silver. She knelt beside it, touched it with her fingers, and the glow rippled outward. It was beautiful, almost magical. She laughed softly, amazed, but when she looked up, she saw the old man standing nearby, his face pale. "Don't play with what you don't understand," he said firmly. "It's just water," she said. He shook his head. "Nothing here is just anything." His warning unsettled her, but part of her couldn't resist the feeling that the island wanted her to see these things. It was showing her something important. As she lay in her small bed that night, she thought about the world beyond the island. Were they still searching for her? Did anyone even believe she might be alive? The thought made her chest tighten. She missed her family, her friends, her old life, but a part of her didn't want to leave anymore. The island had become more than a place. It felt like a living being that had accepted her. She closed her eyes and listened to the sound of the sea. It was no longer just noise, it was a song that told her she was safe, at least for now. But deep down, she also sensed something changing. The calmness she had felt for weeks was slowly giving way to a quiet tension, like the pause before another storm. The island had kept her alive. Yes, but it wasn't done with her yet. Variant, standard, title. She vanished into the waves, part 4. Fadka 3-4. The morning started like any other. The sun rose slowly from behind the sea, painting the water gold. She woke to the sound of birds calling from the trees and the smell of smoke from the small fire outside the hut. The old man was already awake, sitting quietly, mending his fishing net as he did every day. But something about that morning felt different. The air was still, too still. The waves were calm, yet there was a strange heaviness that she couldn't explain. She looked out at the horizon and saw a faint line of something dark in the distance. For a moment she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, but then it moved. "Look," she said, pointing toward the sea. "There's something out there." The old man lifted his head and squinted at the horizon. His expression changed slowly, from confusion to surprise and then to something else she couldn't name. "That's a boat," he said quietly. Her heart skipped a beat. "A boat?" He nodded, his eyes still fixed on the distance. "It's been years since I've seen one come this close." She stood frozen, watching as the shape grew clearer. A small fishing boat, rocking gently on the waves, its white sail catching the wind. For the first time since she had arrived, she felt a spark of hope. Someone was out there. Someone who could take her home. "I have to signal them," she said, her voice trembling. The old man turned to her. "Think before you do," he said softly. "Once they see you, there's no turning back." She hesitated. His tone wasn't angry, but there was a sadness in it that made her pause. "I've been here for so long," she said. "I can't just stay forever." He looked at her for a long time. "The island saved you," he said. "It doesn't always let go easily." She didn't want to hear that. She ran toward the beach, her feet sinking into the sand. The boat was closer now, close enough that she could see the figures on board. She waved her arms and shouted, hoping they would see her. Her voice echoed across the water. At first, nothing happened. Then one of the figures turned and pointed. The boat began to move toward the shore. She felt tears in her eyes. It was real. She was finally going home. The old man walked down slowly behind her. "You've made your choice," he said quietly. She looked at him, confused. "Aren't you happy for me?" He gave a tired smile. "Happiness and sadness often share the same face." "The island will miss you," she frowned. "You talk as if it's alive." He didn't answer. Instead, he bent down and picked up a small wooden carving, the shell she had found weeks earlier, and placed it in her hand. "Keep this," he said. "It will remind you who kept you safe." She held it tightly, her heart heavy with mixed emotions. The boat was almost there now. She could hear the sound of voices calling out. She stepped into the shallow water, ready to wade in. But just then the sky changed. The wind picked up suddenly, strong enough to whip her hair around her face. The waves began to rise, crashing against her legs. The people on the boat shouted something she couldn't hear. The old man looked up at the sky, his face pale. "No," he whispered. "Not now." Within seconds, the calm morning turned wild. Dark clouds rolled in from nowhere. The boat rocked violently as the waves grew larger. She could see the fishermen struggling to control it, shouting to each other. She turned to the old man, panic in her eyes. "What's happening?" "The sea's changing its mind," he said. "It doesn't want to let you go." She shook her head, refusing to believe it. "No, I can't stay here forever. I need to go home." He stepped closer, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. You can fight the sea, but you can't win against it. If it wants to keep you, it will. If it wants to let you go, it will." The rain began to fall, cold and sharp. She looked back at the boat. It was drifting farther now, caught in the strong current. The men were trying to turn it, but the waves were too strong. She screamed, waving her arms again, but her voice was lost in the wind. The storm grew worse by the minute. The waves crashed higher, foaming white, slamming against the shore. She fell to her knees, clutching the carving in her hand. "Please," she whispered to the sea. "Please don't do this." The old man stood beside her, silent. His eyes glistened, not with fear, but with understanding. "It's testing you," he said. "It wants to know if you're ready." She looked at him, confused. "Ready for what?" "For choice," he said. "To leave or to stay. But the choice isn't just yours, it's also the island's." The wind howled, bending the trees, sending sand flying into the air. The storm was fierce, but she refused to move. She stared at the water, tears mixing with rain. "I can't lose my chance," she whispered. Then something strange happened. The waves began to slow, just slightly. The thunder softened. The wind calmed enough for her to hear her own heartbeat. She stood up slowly and walked into the water step by step until it reached her waist. The sea was cold, but she didn't flinch. She closed her eyes and spoke softly. "If you want me to go, let me. If you want me to stay, I'll understand." For a moment, everything stopped. The sea grew still. Even the rain lightened. Then, as if in answer, a single wave rose gently and pushed her backward, back toward the shore. She fell to her knees, gasping. The storm began to drift away, breaking apart as quickly as it had come. She looked up, blinking through the rain, and saw that the boat was still there. But now it was steady again, closer than before. The men were waving, calling out to her. The old man walked to her side and smiled faintly. "It seems the island has decided," he said. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. "Will you come with me?" He shook his head slowly. "My time here isn't done. This island has been my home for too long. But you still have a world waiting for you." Her throat tightened. "I don't want to leave you." He smiled kindly. "You're not leaving me. You're just walking a different path. The island will always be with you." She stood there for a long moment, memorizing his face, the hut, the trees, the beach that had become her world. Then she turned toward the sea and began walking again. The water was calm now, almost welcoming. The boat drew near, and a pair of hands reached out to pull her aboard. As she looked back one last time, the old man was still standing on the beach, small against the wide sky. He lifted his hand in farewell. She waved back, her heart heavy and full. The boat began to move away. The island grew smaller, fading into the mist. She held the wooden carving tightly in her hand, feeling its smooth edges. For a moment she thought she saw something, just a faint shimmer, like the island itself was glowing softly under the clouds. Then it was gone. She sat quietly on the deck, soaked and trembling, watching as the fishermen stared at her in disbelief. They asked where she had come from, how she had survived. She tried to explain, but her words felt too small to describe what had happened. All she could say was, "The island kept me safe." They looked at her strangely, not understanding, but she didn't mind. She turned her gaze toward the horizon, where the sun was beginning to break through the clouds. The storm was over. She was free. But deep inside, she knew that part of her would never truly leave that island. It had saved her once, and somehow she felt it always would. Variant, standard, title. She vanished into the waves. Part 5. Data Fay Rate 3 of 5. The boat reached the mainland just before sunset. The sky was soft orange, and the air carried the smell of salt and wet wood. She sat quietly, wrapped in an old blanket one of the fishermen had given her. They spoke in hushed tones among themselves, still unsure of who she was or how she had appeared in the middle of the sea. When the boat touched the pier, she felt her heart race. The ground beneath her feet was solid again, but it felt strange, too hard, too loud, too full of voices. People gathered quickly, curious about the mysterious woman who had been found at sea. Questions flew from every direction, but her mind was still somewhere far away on the island that had protected her. A kind-faced woman from the Coast Guard led her to a small room and offered her tea. "You're safe now," she said gently. "We'll find your family." Safe. That word echoed in her mind. She wanted to believe it, but safety had come to mean something different to her. It wasn't about walls or people, it was about peace. And the island had given her that kind of peace. Over the next few days, she stayed in a small guest house near the harbor, while the authorities searched for her records. She had been missing for months, and her name had been on the list of lost at sea. When they told her that, she didn't know how to react. It felt like hearing about a stranger. The fishermen who had rescued her came to visit often. They were kind and curious, but didn't press for answers. One evening, one of them asked, "How did you survive all that time?" She hesitated. "The island kept me safe," she said softly. They looked at each other, unsure how to respond. "You mean you found land somewhere?" "Yes," she said. "An island, but I don't know where it is now." They nodded politely, but she could see in their eyes that they didn't believe her. To them, it was impossible. An island that came out of nowhere and then vanished again. But she didn't try to convince them. Some things weren't meant to be explained. As the days passed, she tried to settle into her old life. Her friends came to see her. They cried when they saw her, touching her hands like they were afraid she might disappear again. They asked her what had happened, where she had been, how she had survived. She told them parts of it, the waves, the storm, the quiet days alone. But she left out the old man and the strange peace of the island. It felt too sacred, too unreal to put into ordinary words. At night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the sound of waves and saw the shimmer of sunlight on the water. Sometimes she dreamed of the old man standing on the beach watching her leave. He didn't speak, but she could feel his calm presence as if he were still guiding her. One morning, she walked down to the shore alone. The wind was cold and the sea looked gray and endless. She stood there for a long time, remembering how she had once feared the ocean, how she had thought it had taken everything from her. But now she saw it differently. It had taken her to the island. It had saved her in its own way. A small boy ran past her, chasing a shell rolling in the sand. He looked up at her and smiled. "Are you looking for something?" he asked. She smiled back. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe it's looking for me." He laughed, not understanding, and ran off again. She watched him go, her heart lighter somehow. Weeks passed, and slowly life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could. She got a small job at a local cafe by the harbor. The regulars liked her quiet nature, and she liked the smell of coffee and the hum of conversation around her. But sometimes, when no one was looking, she would stare out the window toward the sea, her thoughts drifting far away. One evening, just before closing, an old sailor came in. He looked weathered and tired, but his eyes were sharp. He sat near the window, ordered a cup of tea, and watched her closely. When she brought it to him, he said softly, "You're the one they found, aren't you?" "The girl from the sea," she nodded slowly. "Yes." He sipped his tea, then leaned closer. "You saw it, didn't you?" "The island." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly. "I've been to those waters. Long ago, before I lost my ship. I saw it once too. A place that shouldn't exist. Green cliffs, white sand. Then it was gone." She stared at him, her heart pounding. "So it's real?" He nodded. "Real enough for those who need it. The sea gives it only to the ones it chooses." They sat in silence for a moment, both understanding something unspoken. When he finished his tea, he stood up and placed a small carved pendant on the table. It was shaped like a seashell, almost identical to the one the old man had given her. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. "Where did you get this?" He smiled gently. "The same place you did." Then he left, disappearing into the mist outside. That night she couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. The idea that others had seen the island made her feel less alone, but it also made her realize something deeper. The island wasn't just a place. It was a gift. It found people who had lost their way and gave them a second chance. Days turned into months. She never saw the old sailor again, but sometimes she would find seashells on the shore that looked just like the carvings from the island. She started keeping them in a small wooden box, a quiet reminder of what she had survived. One afternoon, she decided to visit the place where she had first been found. The fisherman agreed to take her back to that part of the sea. As the boat moved across the waves, her heart beat faster. The sky was clear, the wind gentle. It felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. When they reached the spot, she stood at the edge of the boat, staring into the endless water. "It was somewhere here," she whispered. One of the fishermen nodded. "Strange thing is, there's no island marked anywhere near this area," she smiled faintly. "I know." They waited for a while, but nothing appeared, just the calm sea stretching out in every direction. Yet she didn't feel disappointed. She didn't need to see it again. She could feel it, the warmth of the island, the kindness of the old man, the whisper of the waves. Before leaving, she took out the wooden carving and held it up to the sun. "Thank you," she said softly. When they returned to shore, she felt peaceful for the first time in a long while. She realized that the island hadn't disappeared. It had become a part of her. Years later, people would still talk about the woman who had vanished into the waves and returned alive. Some said she was lucky, others said it was a miracle. But those who looked closely could see something else in her eyes, a quiet knowing, a calm that only comes from those who have seen something extraordinary. She never tried to prove the island existed. She didn't need to. Sometimes, when she walked along the beach at sunset, she could feel the soft pull of the tide, as if the sea was calling her name again. And every now and then, when the wind blew just right, she thought she heard a faint voice on the breeze, the old man's voice, calm and kind, saying, "The island kept you safe." She would smile, close her eyes, and whisper back, "Yes, it still does."